Hello and welcome back to more Dominion Plunder previews. We are on day 4, and Donald Hex says, Plunder previews number 4, next time. Plunder has a sub-theme for its duration cards, next time. So when he said next time yesterday, it wasn't just a joke, although I still think it was a good joke. Anyway, cards that do something the next time a certain thing happens. They just sit around in play turn after turn waiting for that thing. So they're like reactions, but you don't have to have them in your hand. The thing, that's me editorializing. Anyway, he continues, the thing may immediately happen, of course, so that they're discarded that turn, or it may never happen, and all they do is help out your swamp checks and tools. Let's see some. All right. So we start off with Secluded Shrine. 3 cost, action duration, +1 coin. The next time you gain a treasure, trash up to 2 cards from your hand. Secluded Shrine is a basic one. Get a treasure, you'll get to trash 2 things. When you're done getting treasures, Secluded Shrine will quietly leave your deck and just sit there forlornly in play. Aww. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, reaction, I'm sure that there are other ways that this differs from reactions than just like the fact that you don't need them in your hand or whatever. But like conceptually, the reason I think it's nice to think about it that way is because one of the problems with some reactions is the way that they're just fundamentally unreliable. Like I kind of talked about this yesterday, or maybe it was the day before with Moat. At least I think I did. It was with it was Shield. Right. The fact that, Shield is by no means guaranteed to be in your hand when you have an attack play, or when somebody plays an attack on you, and obviously there are some ways that you can do that, but in the general case, and that's fine, like design wise for some cards to work that way. But I'm already excited about this concept because I think it would be also nice to have cards that are like more reliable at that. I mean, some of them, like you already have things like Lighthouse and that are moving in that direction. But this idea of like it can just sit there. I mean, I guess it's kind of like reserve cards, in a way. Like Royal Carriage arguably is this. Wine Merchant arguably is this, like in their own ways. Transmogrify, but they're not. It's not as much of like a reaction as it is a choice. This seems to be like as soon as the condition is triggered, as opposed to it being like an optional thing, the way it is with Royal Carriage or a Transmogrify. I guess Wine Merchant's probably optional too. Anyway, so this seems cool. In particular with Secluded Shrine, like I think this is a reasonably good opener. I mean, so you can kind of choose. It doesn't actually have to stay out, right? So if you draw this with 2 coppers and 2 estates, you can just be like, okay, I'm gonna buy a silver, bam, trash 2 cards. Like it's like you got to play Trading Post. Well, it's not quite like you got to play Trading Post because you didn't get the silver itself into your hand. But on the other hand, like you did get a coin from this, so it's it's not super different, and it's only a 3 cost as opposed to a 5 cost. That's like a simple case. But then like if you have if you see this in 4 coppers and you want to buy a 5, you just buy, like especially on turn 3, you just buy the 5, and then the next turn you buy the silver and you trash 2 estates. Hooray. So like I think that's a pretty nice effect. Like you don't always want to be gaining treasures to trash cards, granted, but because you can trash 2 for 1, as is the case with Trading Post, like early in the game, turning 2 junks or 2 starting cards into a silver is pretty good value. And like I said, it doesn't go in your hand, but on the other hand, you either get the coin that turn or it's already in play, and so it's not taking up a card in your hand. So like I think that's all pretty nice. And it's a 3 cost rather than 5 cost, so it's easier to open with it. Yeah, all in all, this looks like a good card to me. It's definitely not like the most amazing thinning you could have or anything like that. But it looks like a card that will be good. You'll want to open it, and yeah, it's cool. Abundance is the next one. 4 cost treasure duration. Next time you gain an action card, +1 buy and +3 coins. Okay. So abundance is also simple. Get an action, you get 3 coins and a buy. You can save up for a big turn or just pop it immediately as a warped workshop. Yeah, so it is non-terminal. It doesn't do anything when you play it. You have to have a way to gain an action. So like the problem with this card is that like like if you were to open this, which I don't generally think you would, but if you were to open this, the turn that you play it, it does nothing, and unless you can afford the action that you want, despite the fact that the card didn't do anything. And then at that point, you get your buy and your 3 coins. And actually, it says that you can save up for a big turn, but I don't see how, because you don't have a choice. It doesn't say the next time you gain an action card, you may, do this. It just says you do it. So unless you're like not gaining actions, which usually you're going to gain actions, I don't really see how you're saving up. And in fact, you could be put in an awkward spot where like, okay, you draw this and you have like this and like 4 coppers, and you're like, oh, I'd really like a 5. And so what I'd really like to do is have this in play so I can get the 5 next turn, because I can't afford it this turn. But I also don't really want a silver. Like if I have 4, I would rather have like, I'd rather get a 4 cost action. But then if I do that, then this triggers, and then I get a buy and 3 coins. But like now I don't get to use it to do what I wanted to do with it. Like maybe I don't want a 3 cost. But so it seems awkward. I mean, like I think the idea here is that this is cost efficient, right? Like you get your buying your 3 coins for 4 on a 4 cost card, which is more like that's giving you more payload at a lower price than you would normally expect. But it seems like that the constraint here is really significant. I mean, granted, the more payload your deck already has and is capable of playing, the less that downside matters. Because if you already have, if you're like, oh, I have, 10 coins and 2 buys, like, or even 10 coins and 1 buy without this, you can buy a 5 cost, and then it gets triggered and you get your coins and buy, and now you're at 8 coins and a buy, or 8 coins and 2 buys, or whatever. So like in that scenario where you already have you're already going to be able to get the thing that you want without the needing the abundance effect to get it, then it works pretty nicely, because it is a cheap way to add like a significant amount of extra payload. So I think that's going to be its main use case, because I think early in the game it's just going to be awkward unless you want a bunch of cheap stuff. Like if you and not necessarily it doesn't necessarily need to be like 2 costs, but like if you're like happy to buy like a 2 and a 3 or something like that, then you can open with this and you can be like, okay, even if I draw this with 2 coppers and 2 estates, I can still buy the 2 cost that I want, and then I can buy the 3 cost. And that is like, at that point it's pretty useful. I mean, obviously you can like play this, not buy an action, and then go into the next turn and get like have a full 5 card hand with which to buy the action that you want. But even then, like, if you open this in silver, you're like, okay, well, I'll use the silver to hit 5, but like this might collide with the silver, right? Like it's going to hurt your odds of hitting 5. So yeah, I think it's going to be awkward early. I think there's going to be I think its best use case is going to be in the mid to late game when you're like, okay, I already have enough payload to do some stuff, but I want to add more, and this is like a really cost-effective way to do that. I can workshop it. It doesn't cost that much, that sort of thing. So that's, I definitely think Secluded Shrine is the better of these two cards. Let's move on to Flagship. +2 coins. The next time you play a non-command action card, replay it. And this is an action duration command. Interesting. I don't entirely understand why this counts as a command card, because it's not. I guess maybe it's just so that other command cards can't play this card. That was probably what it is. I guess Dominion doesn't have a tendency to bake stuff like into keywords too much. I'm wondering if it is universally the case that command cards can't play other command cards, and like whether that's the sort of thing that would be worth baking into a keyword, but whatever. So yeah, this is, to me, this is pretty obviously like a throne variant, despite the fact that it says command on it. Like in general, the point of command cards is to be able to have flexibility in what you play, right? You get your Overlord because it's like, well, I guess with Overlord, there's another reason, which is you can open it even if you don't have 5, and you can effectively use Overlord to open on a 5, and you have to take some debt to do it, but you get your 5 costs right away. But you can play it as like a bunch of different 5s. You can play it as Junk Dealer, and then once you're done trashing, now you can play it as Draw, or you can play it as Payload, whatever. This isn't really doing that, right? This is a throne room, and it even despite the idea of like, oh, it sits around and waits, like, how long is it going to wait? The next time you play a non-command action card, we might wait till next turn if this is the last thing that you play on your turn, but like then it has to be the first card, right? So there are definitely some limits. Oh, maybe the reason it's a command card is so that you can't replay it. Flagships can't play flagships. Yeah, I could see that. Anyway, it's it doesn't really, compared to like a normal throne room where it's like, okay, you play that and then you got to play whatever it is now. It's not actually that flexible in terms of the like what it can play. Like compared to Royal Carriage, it certainly isn't. Like Royal Carriage, is infinitely flexible in that respect. This is like, and it's a little awkward because it is terminal. So like you can't be like, okay, I want to start my turn by playing my flagship and then my draw card, or my flagship, even if it's non-terminal, right? Or my flagship in my village or whatever. Like it doesn't work. Your turn just ends. So like, you potentially have to play a village first if you want to use it this turn. Presumably the +2 coins is the counterbalancing thing there. It's like, well, this is worse because of that, so we're going to give you +2 coins. I don't think that offsets the loss. Like, I would rather have a throne room than a flagship a lot of the time. There are going to be cases, where having a flagship to kick off your next turn is quite nice. And so, having at least like 2 of them in your deck or something, so that you can be like, okay, well, I could use like throne rooms or whatever, but then I get to the end of my turn, this is the last thing that I play, and then start of my next turn, like it's it's in the same way that you use other duration effects like Mastermind or whatever. In fact, Mastermind is in that scenario at least is pretty comparable, right? And Mastermind's playing it 3 times, but other than that, I guess one difference with Mastermind is that this doesn't care about why you played the card. So like if you play this and then you summon, you're going to replay the summoned card. Whereas Mastermind is like always like you're playing a card from your hand, like independently of whether you summoned or did whatever else. Like if you play this and then your next turn you like use call your T-Mog and you T-Mog your estate into like a 3-cost action, now this is going to play that Well, no, never mind, because that's you're just gaining it. Never mind, take that back. But summon is playing it, so that or like if you you know, flip something with Piazza or you know any other kind of thing like that, where you're playing a card at the start of your turn. So yeah, I mean, you definitely will be able to use this during your turn, like if you have a village, because like you know once you like if you play village and then you play this and then you play like lab, right? So you play village, you're at 2 actions. You play this, you're at 1 action. You play lab, uh, you're still at 1 action. Then you play lab again, and now you're at 2 actions again. So compared to playing, if you were to instead have played village and then thrown to lab, I guess you would be at 3 actions. So because the throne room is also terminal, but it is like putting the lab into play, whereas this is not putting the lab into play. So it is worse, not just from like a timing or ordering standpoint, but it just gives you fewer actions. So that's notable. I mean, it gives you more payload. Usually I would prefer that my deck control cards are giving me those actions to the payload, but you know, sometimes the payload will be better. But yeah, I mean, I think it will be a good card just because like throne rooms are good cards. I just think it, as throne rooms go, it's gonna be on the weaker side because it's kind of awkward, and like you can't really, like delay it in any meaningful sense, right? You're gonna play action cards, so like the idea of sitting around is like these cards are described, like isn't really going to be applicable here. It's gonna get fired off like very quickly. I guess I didn't actually read what Donald X said about it, which is Flagship replays your next action, skipping tricky things like other flagships. Okay, yeah, that's straightforward enough. All right, finally we have Landing Party, +2 cards, +2 actions. The next time the first card you play on a turn is a treasure, put this onto your deck afterwards. Okay, Landing Party is an exotic one. You have to have a turn that you launch with treasure, and then all of your landing parties will top deck. Put it onto your deck. Wow, okay. So, you know, it's encampment or lost city in terms of its effect. So that's really good. And then it's, you know, the duration part is like the downside. It's like, how do we make this, you know, fair? And the answer is that you have to have, like, in the base case, you have to have a dud. I didn't find any of my action cards. Now, obviously, that isn't always going to be the case. Like sometimes you're going to have an action, you're like, I don't need to play this. I'd rather get my landing parties back. And sometimes it's going to be more like, you know, you find a way to get a treasure into play at the start of your turn. Like Reap is an example of like how you could do that. I'm sure there are others. If you summon a cost reduced crown, for example, I'm sure there are less exotic ways than that to do it. But you know, if there's some way that you can do that without it actually taking up your action phase, that would work. And then there's also like extra turn stuff. So like you can use things like mission and voyage, outpost, I guess, although usually you want to be doing more on your outpost turn than just top decking these things. But yeah, maybe. I mean, if this is the only card, you know, it's like I don't have any other source of plus actions, or I don't have any other source of draw, or whatever. This is the only card that makes my deck go. Maybe it is worth using an outpost just for that. But I mean, I could certainly see it being worth it with voyage. I could certainly see it being worth it with mission. You know, so like there's some stuff you could do that way. I mean, crown itself, I was talking about summoning a crown, but you just play a crown. Like, so I don't know why I said that. That's any kind of treasure action card potentially could do that. There's not so many of those. We just got Spell Scroll, but I mean, that's not going to come up very much. What else is even a treasure action? I don't know. Tell me about all the ones I'm forgetting. Anyway, you know, So there are going to be some ways to work around this restriction. I guess the question is, how good is this card when you don't have a way around it? When you really do have to just actually have a turn where you're not playing any action cards. Oh, Villa. Villa's another one. Cavalry is another one. Like, you can, those are other ways to put treasures into play first. Anyway, but yeah, how good is this going to be when you can't do one of those workarounds? That is less clear to me. Like, one of the things that makes encampment good, or like experiment, even though experiment doesn't give you the actions, you know, even when you don't have a way to keep encampment around, or in the case of experiment, obviously you can't, it's just that, like, it's cheap, right? This is a 4 cost, so it's still not like expensive, but it's not cheap the way encampment is cheap, or the way like experiment is cheap. You get 2 of them. So I don't know. I feel like this won't actually be that strong if you don't have a workaround for the duration condition. I mean, although, to be fair, like, in the early game, you know, depending on what you're opening, it's pretty likely that you have a turn where you don't have any actions anyway, or at least where you're willing to not to play your one action, depending on what it is. So, you know, maybe it is a card that you want to open like a fair amount. Although, I mean, it doesn't do that much in the early game. On the flip side, it's like not that much better than opening with like Moat. So I don't know. I could see that, but I mean, I could see that being something that you do early, and then at some point you stop worrying about it and you just let it sit there. This is the one that's the most fits into that description of, you know, a card that just sits around. I mean, Secluded Shrine will certainly sit around, you know, at some point, but most of the time, you know, you're gonna like use that. Actually, does Secluded Shrine next time trash up to 2? Okay, you're not required to trash anything, so that's good to know. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't want to gain a treasure because, you know, I have to trash. Though, I mean, you could be in the position where you don't want to gain it. You don't really want to gain a treasure because you don't want to have to put your Secluded Shrine back into the deck. But then again, if you want to gain a treasure, maybe you do want it because +1 coin is better than nothing. I don't know. Anyway, as for landing party, yeah, I think it will be tough for it to be really good when you don't have a workaround for the constraint, but I think it'll still see play there, you know, as like a tempo card. But definitely not to the same extent as encampment, just because of the price point. All right, now on to landscapes. We start with Rush. 2-cost event, +1 buy. The next time you gain an action card this turn, play it. Rush lets an action leap into play, more useful with some actions than others. So this is like, you don't have innovation, but I can... So you can buy this as much as you want. Yeah, that's potentially very powerful. I mean, obviously sometimes it won't be, but it's targeted and you can repeat it. I mean, you can... Let's see. Because it costs 2, it's going to be rare that you can like actually get any kind of a refund on buying something. So, like, you know, if you pay 2 for Rush, and then you get, well, I guess you do get a rebate. If you pay 2 for Rush, you know, and then you pay 5 for Sacred Grove or whatever, and then you get 3 coins, so you're down 7 coins, and you get 3 coins back, you're down 4 coins. You'd have gotten a rebate. I mean, you have to have 7 coins to begin with, but you have gotten a rebate on your Sacred Grove. And now, like, so where you had 8 coin, you had to have 7 coins to buy Rush and Sacred Grove. But now you have, after buying the Sacred Grove, you have sorry, my brain is cramping. You down 7 from buying it, and then you get 3 back. So now you're down 4. Right. So it's like you bought it for 4 instead of for 5. So you still have 3 coins left. Right. Okay, I was just getting mixed up. But anyway, yeah, so you have 3 coins left, where you would have normally had 2. And so you can buy like a 5 and a 3 on 7 coins that way, for example. If the card that you want to buy is giving you more than 2 coins. That's not going to be super common, but it is something to watch out for. Wine Merchant will be even better that way. You can get those into play for just 3 coins. Or not into play, but I guess the downside though with Wine Merchant though is you want to discard them, so then it ends up being kind of a wash. Unless you're buying several, I guess. But yeah, like being able to, I mean, that's not probably the most interesting case. Being able to do things like, rush, I don't know, like an altar or something like that, could be really nice. Or like a junker. It is I mean, it's not that expensive, but it's expensive enough that I think, like, it's not. I don't think it's going to be able to do gamble level stuff, because gamble can pull stuff out of your discard pile and can like net money that way, and it can play treasures. But I still think this will be like quite strong, like in some circumstances, and is like, it'll be interesting to see what people come up with for it. It's the kind of event that I feel like I will underplay initially, at least, and that other people will figure out really cool stuff to do with, and I'll be very impressed with. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty good. All right, next up we have some Traits Inherited. Setup. You start the game with an inherited card in place of a starting card you choose. Oh, well, that is thematic, I guess, with inheritance. Inherited is a trait that has you start the game with a particular card, usually replacing an estate, but it's up to you. Good times. Right. So whatever the inherited card is, like, you could start the game with a King's Court. Amazing. I mean, not that would actually be, like, that wouldn't even actually be that good. but it would be funny. But you can start with like a recruiter or something. Like, wow. That's like, I mean, it's gonna be potentially very game warping. Like, this trait by itself completely blows open like what is possible in the opening, right? I mean, in ways that are far beyond what I could enumerate. But like, before we could think in terms of like, sometimes there's like loopy things you can do with cavalry, villa stuff, whatever, Way of the Mouse, like with Necropolis, like things like that, but that wasn't just involving, like, aside from the Necropolis thing, I guess that's involving like gaining cards that are on the board. But in terms of just like what can I open with, like what can I do on turns 1 and 2, like, you're gonna have this card you're, in the vast majority of cases, guaranteed to see on turn 1 or 2, and it might be something like, I mean, even something as basic as, like, I don't know, Courtier or something, like +3 coins, like, it's like Curse Gold, except you don't have to take a curse. Like, wow, I can open with some really strong card and not have to take a curse for it, or like I can get, like I said, I can trash something, play a gainer. Like there's so many crazy things that could happen as a result of this, that are like, what is possible, like I said in the opening, is just now like anything is possible basically. It's just no limit. That it seems that'll be really interesting. This one, very very potentially impactful. Like sometimes it won't have a big impact. Sometimes it'll be like, well, I mean, the funny thing is like King's Court. It will still matter that you have a King's Court in your deck, because the thing is, like, on the one hand, it won't affect your opening, but on the other hand, you'll have a King's Court in your deck. So, but like, there will be other cards where it doesn't like really matter that much. Like if you have a Harbinger, it's not that different from like whatever of the allies like allows you to cycle a card or something like that. Although honestly, that's still potentially pretty exciting, because it's not a one-time thing. It's like it's not like you play the Harbinger and then it disappears. But yeah, there's just so many things. My mind is being blown right now just trying to consider it. And then we've got Hasty. When you gain a Hasty card, set it aside and play it at the start of your next turn. Hasty makes a particular card leap into play, albeit a turn later. This one is useful on almost anything. A Hasty territory goes into play, but doesn't do anything else for being played. As always, there's a rulebook. Oh, right. Never mind. Okay, it's a. I was about to say, what happens if you're like provinces Hasty? Wasn't there like a whole bunch of stuff like at one point about like how the rules didn't support the idea of like putting provinces into play and things like that? And well, I mean, it still doesn't, but you could end up playing like territory is not the only victory card that you could end up putting into play. Because there are things that gain copies of cards you have in play, right? Changeling is, how exactly is Changeling worded? I don't remember, but certainly tools. Like you could end up using a combination of Hasty and tools to gain like a bunch of, if you want to gain a bunch of like vineyards or fairgrounds or something. I think you could do that. It's probably not even the most exciting thing to do with it, but it's maybe the most unique. Like you being able to gain victory cards, or just being able to have arbitrary victory cards in play, is like just a new thing. So I'm sure there's going to be some wrinkles that come out of that are surprising. But also, this is just like, this pile summons itself. It's not always going to be a good thing, right? Because sometimes you want to play it now and you don't get to. I assume that there is some. This is more going to have more like, stop moving or no visiting or whatever the heck shenanigans, where like, okay, if you gain it with an armory and it goes on the top of your deck, but then it knows where it is, so it sets itself aside. But then if you gain it and then top deck it with Watchtower, then it doesn't know where it is and it doesn't get set aside. I assume, that's going to be the case. And so like there will be some cases where you can, if you want to gain and play it, you can get around the restriction. Or like if you have innovation, presumably you can choose for innovation to override it, and put it into play now, if you want to. But yeah, there will be times when it's kind of annoying, but I have to think that the vast majority of the time you're going to be like, yeah, that's fine. I like having my card in play next at the start of next turn. That's mostly going to be upside. Definitely like these traits are both very impactful. In general, like I think the traits are the most exciting thing so far in the previews. They just seem cool, interesting, powerful, whatever. Game warping, adding lots of variety. So I really like them. With the next time durations, I guess I'm hoping to see something that's a little bit more like in between. So I want to go back and look at I guess Secluded Shrine is probably the one that's the most like quote unquote in between, in the sense that you have the most amount of control over when it happens, and thus like it feels the most like something that you're choosing like to specifically trigger. So like, you know, the next time you gain an action card is like you're going to gain action cards all the time, so it's like just going to trigger very quickly. The next time you play a card, you know, non-command action card, replay it again, you're going to trigger that very quickly because you're going to do that. The next time the first card you play on a turn is a treasure, there's going to be a lot of times where that's the opposite, where you're like very rarely going to do that, and so it's going to be very rare to trigger. And I mean, to be fair, like I think that works for the design of this particular card, and I don't think like, you know, it's not like I would want this card to be different. I think it is like, I think that's a cool like kind of like mini game type thing in a way to make like a card that has a powerful effect like balanced and limited, as is the case with encampment and blah blah blah. But I would like to see, I hope to see more cards more similar to Secluded Shrine, in the sense that there's like that the condition that triggers them is like realistically both something that could not happen, that could go without happening for a while, but also could happen soon, depending on kind of like what you want, which I feel like is not the case with Abundance or Flagship. Anyway, so we'll see what comes of that. But in any case, thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for the final day of previews. In the meantime, check the stuff out on Dominion.games. And until then.